So after leaving the cinema from seeing Alien Covenant again yesterday, I was reminded of a game series that has long since been relegated to the dustbins of gaming history, and that would be Dead Space. Dead Space is a franchise that has been long since forgotten in the eyes of many, but to me and many others it's a game that we still hold dear to us. Dead Space is a franchise that unfortunately kind of met its fate due to the hands of EA back in 2013 with the release of Dead Space 3. I'm not going to go through all the history of what went wrong with Dead Space 3 because trust me, there's a lot of things. I'll give you some reasons why, but I'll give you a little bit of a brief overview of the Dead Space franchise anyway, because I know a lot of people aren't too familiar with it. Anyway, Dead Space 1 released way back in October 14th, 2008, back in the action-packed year of 2008, man. So many games came out that year. But anyway, Dead Space released in 2008, and I played it in 2009. I remember I was at my friend's house staying over one night, and I saw a copy of this game sitting there, and it was Dead Space, but I didn't know what it was at the time. So I pick it up and I have a little look at the box, and if you've seen the box art for Dead Space 1, then you know what I'm talking about. The dismembered arm that's floating in the middle of space, that was really... It caught my attention, that's for sure. And that's the main thing that caught my attention with Dead Space, is just that box art, because I feel like with games nowadays they don't really make too much of an effort on their first impression. You know, they kind of just go, oh yeah, here's a generic cover, you know, with this guy standing on the front cover with a gun in his hands. Like on Dead Space 3, they put in no fucking effort with that cover whatsoever, but Dead Space really caught my attention. Anyway, so I pick up this game and I ask his dad if I can borrow it because it was his dad's game, but I end up playing it and the game scares the fucking shit out of me because I was still a kid when I played this game. And honestly, it's what got me into a lot of the sci-fi stuff that I'm into nowadays. No doubt I wouldn't have been a fan of Alien if I hadn't been a fan of Dead Space. And Dead Space is a game that is very closely related to Alien as a franchise. Now, Alien, it was the original sci-fi horror movie. I'm not saying it's the original or the first, but we all know that Alien is kind of the movie that started the whole sci-fi horror thing, right? And honestly, Dead Space borrowed a lot from Alien. It borrowed very heavily. And I'm not saying that is a bad thing, because trust me, when a movie is as fucking good as Alien, you want to emulate it as much as you possibly can in your game. And that's definitely what brought a lot of people into Dead Space, because it felt so much like Alien, and it realistically was just the Alien game that we always wanted, but we never ever got. Of course, we got Alien Isolation, it was pretty good, but, you know, like, we never got a game where you play as the guy that goes around with a pulse rifle that blows the fuck out of all the aliens. Of course, the closest thing to that was Aliens Colonial Marines, but that game was fucking awful. But Alien and Dead Space. Aliens has a very bad history, kind of like Dead Space. Now, if we're gonna analyse and compare the two, then you can see the obvious similarities as it goes. You've got Dead Space 1, which is very similar in atmosphere and setup to the original Alien, and then you've got Dead Space 2, which is the aliens of Dead Space, and that is very awesome. You know, it feels like Aliens, and it takes place a lot more similarly to Aliens, where it just expands upon everything, makes it bigger and better. And then you got Dead Space 3, which, much like Alien 3, just fucks up so many things. And that's why we didn't really like Dead Space 3. It fucked up so many things. It basically took what was once a great franchise that we all loved, this survival horror game that had you on the edge of your seat the entire time. It had you gripped with actual fear and panic. And it basically turned it into this generic corridor shooter like Mass Effect or Gears of War. Now, I'm not saying that Mass Effect or Gears of War are bad, because trust me, both have their own merits. I love Gears of War. I wasn't too keen on Mass Effect, but I can respect it. Of course, I'm talking about the original Mass Effect series, not Andromeda, because that game was a steaming hot pile of shit. But Dead Space 3 was just an action game. And then you got Alien 3, which was pretty shit, I know. And a lot of people would agree that that is the worst part of the franchise. And this is where Alien Covenant comes into this, because Alien Covenant and Prometheus are the new rejuvenated Alien. Yeah, like, of course, Alien Covenant is called Alien, but Prometheus was supposed to be the spark that brings the Alien franchise back to life, and I would say that it actually has. Now, a lot of people would like to argue that Prometheus is perhaps one of the worst Alien movies that there's ever been, even worse than Resurrection and Alien 3. But the thing is, in my eyes, is Prometheus is a very popular movie. We can't deny that. Like, Prometheus brought Alien to the eyes of many of this new generation of kids, me myself included. I wouldn't know about Alien, and I wouldn't have definitely watched it if it wasn't for Prometheus and the impact that film had on me. I really did enjoy that movie. A lot of people don't, and that's understandable. Entitled to our own opinions, aren't we? And I was gripped by Prometheus. I love that movie, and it wouldn't be, if it wasn't for Prometheus, I wouldn't have enjoyed Alien. And this is what I propose with the Dead Space series, because as of right now, it's been canned. It really has been canned and left in development hell by EA. In fact, it's not even development hell because it's not a thing anymore. Dead Space was cancelled after the third launch because Dead Space 3 was such a fucking disaster. It sold poorly because EA were banking on people wanting an action game, which is not what we wanted. We wanted Dead Space, not Mass Effect or Gears of War, but with Isaac Clarke and plasma cutters. That's not what we wanted from Dead Space 3, and it's not what we got either. What we got was this piece of shit action game, and this is what I propose for whatever they do with the Dead Space franchise, because trust me, Visceral Games have tweeted recently. I'm not too sure how recent you could call it, but they did definitely tweet within the last couple of years saying that, basically replying to somebody saying if there was enough attention and enough demand for another Dead Space game, then you know what, we might do another Dead Space game, which was a very, very kind of off the cuff kind of tweet from Visceral Games, and many people may just, you know, kind of sweep that under the rug and say, oh, whatever, that's kind of the developers' way of saying, ha ha ha, well, it might not happen, it might happen, you know, like how developers kind of mince words and they kind of, you know, fuck around, beat around the bush and just go, yeah, you know, like that's what developers are like a lot of the time. However, I do think there was some weight to that comment from Visceral Games, and personally, I know there's a lot more people out there that want this game to happen, like a Dead Space 4, but what I propose is what they're doing with Alien right now. Now, Alien is back in the hands of Ridley Scott, so I think we can all trust whatever they're doing because it's Ridley Scott. This is the original guy who made Alien, and what I propose is they go down a route similar to Prometheus and Alien Covenant, because in my eyes there's a lot of the Dead Space universe that still hasn't been explored as of yet. There's a lot of stuff that we still don't know exactly much about, especially when it comes to the markers, unitology and EarthGov, because trust me, there's a lot of shit going on with these corporations that you don't know about. When it comes to the markers, we still don't ultimately know much about them. We just know that they create necromorphs, and the unitology the cult followers of the Church of Unitology, they're absolutely obsessed with it, but what we don't know is why they want it. Obviously, they seek to bring about this divergence event. I think we should ultimately learn a little bit more about it, because there is a lot of information out there. There's a lot of books, media, when it comes to books, well, media like books, movies, whatever, about Dead Space, but none of it has really been considered canon, and I think this is what they could do with another prequel. They could draw the line at what is canon and what isn't canon, and when it comes to all these comic books and graphic novels, books and movies that are there about Dead Space, they could kind of bring all this in and make a greater expanded universe, because as of right now it's just the games, and to the average consumer that plays the games, they still don't know a lot about this stuff, whereas somebody like me, I know a lot about the markers and all that, but the average player doesn't. And this is where I think they could take the Dead Space franchise. They could take it into the direction of doing a couple of prequels and then maybe taking us back in for Dead Space 4, because trust me, there's a lot of things that I'd like to see in a Dead Space 4. I'd love to see Isaac Clarke return, but I don't think we need him back just yet. Now, what I mean is with Alien prequels and all, is what they're doing with Prometheus and Alien Covenant right now is exploring the origins and the mythos surrounding the xenomorph, of course. And what they could do with Dead Space is explore the origins and the backstory and the mythos regarding the marker and the necromorphs, because trust me, I feel like they really do deserve a bit more backstory. Like, the necromorphs are fucking fascinating, but we don't know much about them other than the marker causes infestations in necromorphs, and I think if they were to expand a little bit more upon this in a prequel, that would be awesome. Now, I just want to make a couple of notes here about what I'd like to see and what I wouldn't like to see from a prequel. Now, the first thing that I'd like to see from a prequel is a new protagonist. Now, I'm not saying that I dislike Isaac Clarke. Trust me, I love Gunnar Wright, and I love Isaac Clarke, and I want to see Gunnar Wright come back as Isaac Clarke at some point in the future, but just not yet. If they were going to do a prequel game, I wouldn't want Isaac in it, because Isaac's story starts in Dead Space 1, right? When you're on board that little shuttle going on to the USG Ishimura, this is when Isaac's story begins. He doesn't need any more backstory as it is, because in Dead Space 1 he's supposed to be a blank slate, and he is until the end game, and then of course Dead Space 2 is when they start expanding and fleshing out Isaac as a character. He doesn't need a little bit more backstory because he's already got enough. However, what they could do is bring in a new protagonist. Now, I'm not talking about Carver from Dead Space 3 or anybody like that. I mean an actual new protagonist, and if we like them enough, then we could possibly see them return with some explanation and a little bit hoo-ha in Dead Space 4. Now, of course, the first thing that we need from a Dead Space prequel is for it to be survival horror. That's why we didn't respond well to Dead Space 3. That's why the sales were so low and so poor, is because it did what we didn't want. It made it an action game. What we want is survival horror. Now, in this day and age, you could probably consider Dead Space not survival, really, because people consider, you know, stuff like H1Z1 to be all about survival. You know, there's all these other games like H1Z1, DayZ, stuff like that. So I could almost consider Dead Space not being survival horror, but the original aspect of the word survival horror, that fits Dead Space, and I think that's what the prequels should be focusing on, is bringing back that atmosphere of the original Dead Space, because the original Dead Space had this different atmosphere. Like, every game has had a different atmosphere to it. Such as the Alien movies. Like, you can say that Aliens does not have the same vibe or atmosphere as Alien, and that's definitely true right there. And that's what they need to do, because every Dead Space game's had a different atmosphere, but I think they would need to recapture some of that original atmosphere of Dead Space. You know, bring it back, get us used to the original feeling of Dead Space again, and make us crave a little bit more, and then bring us back with Dead Space 4, and give us Isaac Clarke. Like, realistically, that's what the best choice of action would be here. Well, the best plan of action. That would be a really solid idea, in my honest opinion, is bringing in this prequel, not even a prequel trilogy, maybe even 2 prequels, or 1 would be enough, just so that we get used to Dead Space again. And also another thing is so that Visceral Games could start experimenting a little bit, because you could tell that with Dead Space 3 they wanted to ultimately experiment with some certain things, and it wasn't the best choice experimenting on the last entry into the franchise, or the last entry into the perceived franchise, because they were still working on Dead Space 4 and it got cancelled due to low sales of Dead Space 3. And ultimately, if they were going to do a prequel, that gives them a lot more room to experiment with new things. Because if it doesn't work, then that's it. You can kind of quarantine it off in its own little bubble and say, well, you know what, we wanted to try some new things, it didn't work out, oh well. We won't bring this stuff back for Dead Space 4. And that's what I like. If they were going to do a Dead Space 4, then it would have new and improved features. It would have new stuff that we do enjoy. Like, if they bring out a prequel and add in some cool new things that we really do enjoy, then they could just go, well, you know what, we'll bring that stuff into Dead Space 4, considering people really responded well with it. And then we'd have a bigger, better experience in Dead Space 4. I'm just sitting here trying to work out what would make the best Dead Space experience, and that's what I honestly think will. Because if we just jump back in at the deep end and go into Dead Space 4, there's a lot of people that still aren't used to Dead Space at this point, because, you know, there's this new generation of gamers, there's a new generation of consoles, and of course the original Dead Space trilogy is on the next generation of consoles, but these new players nowadays that would be buying Dead Space 4, they aren't going to think that, well, they're just going to go, well, what's Dead Space? What is the markers? What is the Church of Unitology? What is all this stuff? And honestly, they'll have to go back and play the original trilogy to understand, but the new generation of consoles and gamers, you know, they kind of just want to jump into the 4th entry and start playing that, even if they don't understand things. So, honestly, in my opinion, if they bring out a prequel which kind of brings people up to speed, and then they bring out Dead Space 4, I think it would be a great idea. It definitely would breathe life into the franchise, which I think is the most important thing at this point. Because, You've got Gunnar right. Like, there is this channel that I've been watching for the last while called JKP Rising. This guy's done a lot of work in regards to the Dead Space 4 movement, you know, constantly bombarding EA and Visceral Games with messages on Twitter or emails saying that, hey, we're interested in a new IP or a new entry into the Dead Space IP. Can we get it, please? And this guy managed to interview Gunnar Wright on his YouTube channel, and Gunnar is still very much interested in playing Isaac Clarke, so you can tell that his story is not over yet, and Gunnar Wright sees Isaac's story as still having a lot more to tell. And honestly, that's what I see it as well. I think there's still a lot more stories to be told within the Dead Space universe, and I honestly think it deserves it. I think that Dead Space is a franchise that deserves to come back from this. Just because they made one slightly shitty game doesn't mean that that should be it. Call of Duty has had numerous shit entries, but it keeps churning out more games. And I think that Dead Space just needs to have the story it deserves. Like, they haven't finished it yet. There's a cliffhanger at the end of Dead Space 3 that hasn't been tied up. Just let us finish it. Let us finish the story. That's all I'm saying. Finish the story, make us whole again, that's it. So yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. I know it's been a bit of a longer one, but I just wanted to gush about Dead Space and just talk about how much I wanted a new one, because I feel like it really deserves it, you know? And a lot of people just aren't really, you know, they aren't really concerned by Dead Space at this point, because, hey, Dead Space 3 was a fuck up and it was a corporate decision to make it as shit as it was, and it's kind of been relegated to the dustbins of gaming history, which I'm really sad about, because I love Dead Space, I really do, and I will still continue on playing Dead Space 1, 2 and 3. Even though I don't really like 3 too much, I will still play the original trilogy over and over again and still enjoy it. So yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. It's been a Lone Courier. Leave your opinions in the comments below. Do you think they should launch into Dead Space 4 right now, or do you think they should take their time and give us a little bit more of a prequel game and get us back into the feeling of Dead Space? I think that's what they should do, but I want to hear your guys' opinion, so leave it in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. And yeah, if you're still here at the end of the video, then leave a comment saying make us whole again, just so I can tell who's watched the entire video. So yeah, do that if you've seen the whole video, please. I would appreciate that. Cheers.